It may interest you to sit in with us at a meeting of the Production Code Administration in Hollywood, where we are all working for finer and better motion pictures.
Moving on all cylinders, the film industry was booming. It was a full-fledged business, and it made California its home. With popularity comes gossip and scandal, as risque movies, deaths, and salacious rumors had people talking. As the rumor mill churned, various groups and state officials began to censor, or at least talk about how they could censor films. In comes William H. Hayes and the MPPDA, commonly referred to as the Hayes Office, to counteract government censorship. This was just the beginning of what would become a long-standing production code that could make or break a film and an entire industry. Hello, thank you for joining the Quiet Riot today. I'm your host Ainsley, and this is where we talk film, television, and media, with an emphasis on older films and nostalgic favorites. In today's video, I want to take you on a little journey where we are going to discuss Joseph Breen and the Hayes Code. This is the third video in my censorship series. I will be sure to link the others below if you would like to check them out, and I will be touching on some of the subjects that I have in those films as well in this one. I want to give you a little warning, as we are going to be talking about some really sensitive subjects, including anti-Semitism and all-around prejudice, as censorship really veered in towards the don't hire this person and don't talk about this subject territory. If that's a little bit too much for you, I completely understand. There will be some timestamps in the description box below if you want to skip particular things. Let's go. In 1922, the Motion Pictures Producer and Distributors of America was formed, commonly referred to as the Hayes Office after President William H. Hayes. It was formed after a series of scandals involving Hollywood personalities. The goal was to counteract government censorship by coming up with a solution that would allow the industry to govern itself. It would still be 12 years until Hollywood censorship meant a glossy look at everyday life. In 1927, a set of guidelines were written. This was a list of don'ts and be carefuls that would eventually evolve into something more. The guide was for studios to follow while making their films to ensure that their films were appropriate to release throughout the US. In 1929, editor Martin J. Quigley, the president of Quigley Publishing and publisher of Motion Picture Daily, Motion Picture Herald, International Motion Picture Almanac, and much more, joined forces with Daniel Lord to write the production code. Daniel Aloysius Lord was an American Jesuit priest and Catholic writer who wrote 32 books, 15 booklets, and 228 pamphlets, and countless articles, 70 plays, musicals, and pageants. But he was definitely most known for his work on the production code. In March 1930, William H. Hayes officially implemented the production code, leading to what would be called the pre-code era of filmmaking. This era showed that the code, while implemented, was not being enforced. That would all change in July of 1934 when Joseph Breen was hired and the Hayes Code was officially enforced. Joseph Ignatius Breen was born on October 14, 1988 in Philadelphia, the youngest of three boys, to Irish immigrant Hugh Breen and Mary Breen. Joseph was raised in a strict Catholic home and attended Catholic schools that would inform his career later in life. As an adult, and after 2 years at St. Joseph College, Breen dropped out. After leaving school, Breen would go on to work as a journalist for 14 years in Philadelphia, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. After leaving work as a journalist, Breen went on to work for the U.S. Foreign Office in Kingston, Jamaica, and Toronto, Canada. In 1926, he served as the publicity director for 28th International Eucharistic Congress in Chicago. Joseph Breen was an influential layperson for the Catholic Church, and as early as 1931, he worked as a troubleshooter for William H. Hayes. In 1933, the National Legion of Decency began to rate films independently. This put pressure on the film industry. There was a planned boycott by Protestant groups and women's groups for films they deemed immoral. After this, William H. Hayes decided to hire Joseph Breen, a guy he considered to be a very strict Catholic hand. He hired Joseph Breen to head the Production Code Administration, the PCA, and enforce the Hayes Code. Unlike previous attempts at self-censorship, the PCA decisions were binding. No film without the PCA stamp of approval could be shown in a United States theater. If a producer attempted to show a film without the approval of the PCA, they would be billed a $25,000 fine. The nationwide code was officially enforced on July 1st, 1934. The PCA and the production code were received poorly by studios and those that worked for them. Writers and directors had to find new ways to convey various subject matter. Betty Boop, who had previously been drawn to wear flapper attire, was now dressed in more appropriate attire, according to the censors. It Happened One Night was the first film that fully adhered to the Hayes Code, and this could be why the film was the first to sweep the Academy Awards. Though it is a good movie deserving of its accolades, you can tell that the film was originally written to be more racy than it ended up being. This is also where the same room with a sheet down the middle trope was born. While Casablanca probably benefited from the censors, the original script did not simply imply that Rick and Elsa had slept together while in Paris. Things were far more explicit as their relationship goes. The film's ending was born out of the censorship that existed in the period, and it just goes to show that yes, the censorship did help in certain areas, but that's kind of just a fluke. In 1936, 2 years in as president of the PCA, Liberty magazine quoted as saying, "Joseph Breen gave more influence in standardized world thinking than Mussolini, Stalin, or Hitler." During his time in Hollywood, Joseph Breen was lauded by anti-Semites like William Dudley Belly, the founder of the anti-Semitic organization Silver Legion of America. Breen himself voiced deeply anti-Semitic views. He feared that Jewish filmmakers would use Nazi mistreatment of Jewish people during the 1930s as a vehicle for propaganda. He was concerned that Germany would be offended by the harsh depiction of Nazis. I wish he actually cared more about the Jewish people in the United States or worldwide than he cared about the Germans and Nazis. He's quoted as saying, "There is a strong pro-German and anti-Semitic feeling in this country, and while those that would likely to approve of an anti-Hitler picture may think well of such an enterprise, they should keep in mind that millions of Americans might think otherwise." While he was of course concerned with censorship, he was also just as concerned with money as big producers of the time. Breen claimed that plans to make such pictures were being coordinated through the Hollywood Anti-Nazi League, which he claimed was conducted and financed almost entirely by Jews. When Pope Pius denounced anti-Semitism, it is not possible for Christians to take part in anti-Semitism. Breen did his part by jumping on the bandwagon and issuing a statement of his own. In my judgment, there is nothing more important for us Catholics to do at the present moment than to use our energy in stemming the tide of racial bigotry and hostility. And he didn't do any of that until the Pope issued that statement. So his statement in support of Jewish people and against anti-Semitism really didn't mean much of anything. As a result of Breen's anti-communist views, the censorship board pressured MGM to drop plans to film Sinclair Lewis's anti-fascist novel, It Can't Happen Here. In April of 1941, Breen resigned from the PCA. He briefly put in a stint as the general manager of RKO Pictures, but returned to the PCA in 1942. By the mid-1950s, Breen's power in Hollywood was diminishing. Howard Hughes, owner of RKO, released The French Line, a film that featured revealing images of Jane Russell in a bathing suit. Breen never approved the film's release. In 1951, Breen's office refused to approve Otto Preminger's film The Moon is Blue because of objections to the dialogue. United Artists backed Preminger in his decision to release the movies without Breen's approval. Breen responded to these events in an interview with Aline Mosby. After the events of the past 10 months, the code is more entrenched than ever before. Those events brought tremendous support from groups all over the country. The world was changing and the film industry had to change with it. In 1954, Breen retired from the PCA and was replaced by Jeffrey Sherlock. After his retirement, he was awarded by the Academy Award for, get this, his conscientious, open-minded, and dignified management of the MPPC. Now, when you're managing and enforcing a censor, I just don't get how you can maintain or be an open-minded person, especially when you're voicing very anti-Semitic views and you're an anti-communist. Following his retirement, the industry continued to grow out of the Hays Code as films began to push boundaries. Otto Preminger, Alfred Hitchcock, and Billy Wilder are three directors that pushed the envelope and helped change the industry's ideals. In our next video on Hollywood censorship, we will be discussing the fall of the Hays Code and the birth of a new rating system. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I thoroughly appreciate it. We will be making more videos on censorship throughout Hollywood, and I hope that you decide to stick around. I will probably be going into more censorship and music, as I do have a little video on that if you would like to check that one out as well. If you have any requests or recommendations and things you'd like to see on the channel, please feel free to comment below what you would like to see. And I'd also like to know your thoughts on the rating system as a whole, the Hays Code, and how things were earlier in Hollywood. It's not surprising that Joseph Breen was the man that he was. He really ruled Hollywood with an iron fist, and it's really sad to see what other people lost when it came to their careers in Hollywood once the Hays Code was officially enforced by Joseph Breen. I will be doing more videos on specific actors and those behind the scenes and talk about how censorship in Hollywood, particularly the Hays Code, really affected them in their careers. If there's anybody you have in mind, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and check out the description box for my social media if you would like to go and follow me on any of those. And you can also check out my website, ainsleypeace.com. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.